welcome to Combat Society. It's been a big week of fights that have just happened. My name is Madison and this is Tyrone. UFC Beijing had some awesome heavyweight matchups that mean a lot for the future of the division. We'll discuss that, as well as UFC Adelaide, which is in Australia, and we're glad to have another card full of young Aussie prospects and some awesome matchups. As well as UFC Melbourne, Israel Adesanya versus Anderson Silva was announced, and that is a thrilling middleweight clash, and we'll discuss who we think will win that one. It's a hard one to pick. As well as Asian MMA, we've been following one championship for a while, and they had a double header on the weekend for the heavyweight title and the lightweight title, so we'll also get into that one. But first, UFC Beijing, the main event, Francis Ngannou versus Curtis Blades.
Yeah, so main event, Francis Ngannou, Curtis Blades. Francis came out with the perfect performance. He couldn't script it any better. 25-second knockout, avoided takedowns, and got his confidence back and proved that he's still a threat in the heavyweight division.
Yeah, so we were thinking that, some people were thinking that he was a hype train and that was derailed when he lost twice earlier this year. The heavyweight title was on the line, he lost that to Stipe. Then he lost in a very uneventful performance against Derek Lewis, and he was lacking confidence. He lost both of those at the start of the year, and then not many people will fight a third time, and he's did that and won against a legitimate wrestler who's improved since the last time they fought.
Yeah, so Curtis Blades wanted to avenge that loss on his UFC debut against Francis. Now, people were thinking that Francis, once he lost to Stipe, he was exposed for the wrestling, and that just wasn't the case. When you lose to Stipe, it's not that you get exposed, it's just that Stipe is one of the most dominant heavyweights of all time in the UFC. So losing to him is not it's not that bad, and to say he's exposed or he's not of that caliber is absolutely dumb. The only people that he's lost to in the UFC are the former champ and the number one contender, and he just proved that he can beat Curtis Blades again, and he can hold his position in that heavyweight rankings. Yeah,
another guy that we thought was out of character was Alistair Overeem, who was on a few losses as well. Also, a similar thing, he's won now against the guy who was 12-0 and it was his debut. So the difference in these guys was the experience, the main thing. Alistair Overeem coming into his 62nd fight, and Sergey Pavlovich only having 12 fights, and we noticed that there was a difference there.
Yeah, so this fight could have gone two ways, and it went the way that Alistair Overeem wanted it to go. So he won by knockout. He tripped him early in the first round, and then laid the ground and pound on and won. Now, on the flip side of that, he's fighting against a UFC debuter. Now, if you lose that fight, you can pretty much hang up the gloves at that point. You're not going to get cut because the UFC does make a lot of money from you and people do want to watch you fight. But if you're losing to somebody with 12 fights and is debuting on the UFC, then you don't really belong in the UFC, and honestly, do not belong even fighting at that point. When you've had such a long career like he has, it'd be better to hang up the gloves. But he did prove that he is still a threat in the heavyweight division. He's not hanging them up anytime soon. He wants to fight top contenders, and he wants to campaign for a title shot once again.
Yeah, so he's got a few options. He can fight, and I'm glad he won, because it just makes it more interesting for the heavyweight division. Also, UFC Adelaide, in our home country of Australia, brilliant to see this card form. It is such a nice card from top to bottom. We've got some youngsters coming up, and who are going to fight and prove themselves, as well as some veteran guys. So the main event is Junior Dos Santos versus Tai Tuivasa, and it's experience to see another young guy as well in this.
Yeah, this main event is the classic legend, former champ, maybe has been inconsistent recently against a guy who's on an absolute tear, who's got all the momentum. He's undefeated. Now they're both heavy hitters. They both can throw big power. They can knock each other out at any time, and it's going to be a great fight. We do have some advantages on Junior Dos Santos' side. If this fight it's going to be a 5-round fight. If this does go 5 rounds, we haven't seen Tuivasa in a 5-round fight. We saw him in his previous fight. He fought against Andrei Arlovski. That was a 3-round fight. People were saying he couldn't go the 15 minutes. He did. Now, can he prove people wrong again? Who knows? But it's going to be a great fight.
Yeah, 5 rounds for Tai Tuivasa is a difficult ask, because people have criticised him for his cardio, his weight issues. So we just don't know, but Tai Tuivasa is a skilled striker. He's a very skilled striker, and I think these guys want to throw. So that puts it in his hands. You don't know what's going to happen there.
Yeah, when you have two guys like this that they can knock you out with either hand, I don't predict this fight to be going 5 rounds. It could. If it does, I would have to favour Junior Dos Santos. But if this fight is going to go like I think it will, it'll be an early finish within 2 rounds, and I think Tuivasa can win that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Tuivasa can win, but either guy can win here. Junior Dos Santos wants to upset a young guy coming up, and that's entirely possible. He could completely obliterate Tai Tuivasa, and he could be another guy just who's not all that. But Junior Dos Santos is still a former champ, and he has the ability to put great performances on and have another run at the title.
Yeah.
So you never know.
Yeah.
Also, Mark Hunt is fighting Justin Willis, and he's been saying, a lot of people have been saying that this is Mark Hunt's retirement fight, but with UFC Melbourne coming up, I don't know if that's a possibility. He's fighting Justin Willis at UFC Adelaide, and they've recently been trying to phase Mark Hunt out.
Yeah, so they're saying that this is Mark Hunt's retirement fight, or it could be his last fight, even though there is another card in Melbourne, who knows. But they're not giving him those matchups that put on exciting fights. Now, Mark Hunt has had a lot of issues with the UFC in the last 2 years, namely the Brock Lesnar incident where he tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs. So since Mark Hunt's been coming out against the UFC pretty hard since then, now they haven't been giving him the exciting fights of the big strikers that put on those exciting fights. The fights they're giving him are the wrestlers, the guys who can easily take him down, and it sort of makes for a boring fight. When you look at Mark Hunt fight, you want to see him stand up and throw. You don't want to see him just get taken down. But they seem to be giving him all these wrestlers. Now this Justin Willis guy is trying to make a name for himself, and if he can get a win here against Mark Hunt, he's really going to shoot up the rankings.
Yeah, in this, if I was to predict, I don't know if Justin Willis is at that level of wrestling to be able to get it to the ground before he gets struck by Mark Hunt. So I'm actually going to predict Mark Hunt. What do you think?
I don't really know how this fight will go. We're just going to have to see. It's going to be just a battle of the game plans, and if Justin Willis can implement his game plan, he'll win, and if Mark Hunt can keep it on the feet, I think he can knock anybody out. So it's going to be great.
Yeah. Also, another young guy, best mates with Tai Tuivasa. He's in with the Sydney crew. It's Tyson Pedro versus a legend, Shogun Rua, and that is another legend versus young guy.
Yeah. So this card is the story of young Aussie versus UFC former champion, former legend, or current legend. Shogun's a tough customer for anybody, and Tyson Pedro has been inconsistent lately, so it's going to make for a great fight. They both can do everything well, so it's going to be a great fight.
Yeah. Well, if we can get another win here, that just puts their stock more up. There's another card coming up, and if some of these Aussies do well, we're going to see a lot of them. I'd love to see a lot of these Aussies go on and fight in the Melbourne card as well. But we also have young fighters coming from Hex. We have 3 of the fighters on this card who just were signed to the UFC from Hex. So it just shows the level of competition in Australia is UFC standard. Jimmy Crute is fighting Paul Craig. He was light heavyweight champion in Hex, and he just won on the Contender Series and scored his contract into the UFC. So that's awesome to see. He's a prospect. We also got Suman Mokhtarian.
Yep.
Was undefeated. He was undefeated. Was in the Ultimate Fighter, and is fighting now. Got his contract, and his mate and training partner Alex Georges, who we spoke about in our Hex review, put on one of the fights of the year on Hex, and has now been signed to the UFC. Australian top team making moves in the UFC, and I'd love to see some of these Aussies put on great performances.
Yeah, so Alex Georges, we did cover him on the Hex 17 recap, but he's taken this fight on 2 weeks' notice.
Yep.
And
less than 2 weeks.
Less than 2 weeks' notice. I don't really know much about the guy he's facing, but I believe that guy's debuting as well on UFC.
So
we know Alex Georges, if he can get a win here, we know he likes to muck around on the mic. We know he likes to
very interesting character.
He likes to talk, and he likes to be controversial. And we've seen that from his fights at Hex. You know, he gets on the mic and really lets the crowd know either way. But if he can get a win here, put on a great performance like he's been doing in Hex, and jumps on the mic and be controversial, the crowd's going to eat it up, and he'll become that polarizing figure we've been talking about. Really, because when you're naturally got that controversial personality, the fans in the crowd, they understand it. They know you're not putting it on, and
like Colby Covington
situation.
Like it's
very
real.
Yeah.
Like Conor McGregor doesn't need to be anybody. That's who he is.
Yeah.
Alex Georges is who he is.
Yeah.
And that's it.
I really do see if he can really win some fights, win his fights, finish his fights. As Dana White always says, win your fights, finish your fights, and then if he jumps on the mic and talks, he could really become a fan favorite.
Yeah. Well, if we see these three young Hex fighters do well, they will secure them as UFC caliber fighters. Absolutely. And they will be there for a long time to come and put on more performances, more fights, and it will just be better for Australian MMA.
Even Suman, if he comes out in this fight and wants to showcase his submission skills,
he did hit a twister.
He was a 1 of 3 ever, or is it one of 2 or 3 in MMA? If he comes out with that kind of mentality, if he wants to really showcase his skills, you know, this is going to really shoot them up the rankings and really get them noticed, and that's what you want. Dana and the whole team, they want guys who put on exciting fights,
and they're watching Hex.
I think Aussies are putting on some of the most exciting fights out of any country represented in the UFC, so it's going to be great.
Yeah, it's awesome. And that brings us on to UFC Melbourne, UFC 234. That's headlined by Robert Whittaker and Kelvin Gastelum. Israel Adesanya just got announced to be fighting Anderson Silva. And that was rumoured. We didn't think it was possible, but it is happening now. Yep. Two immensely talented strikers going at it. Yep. No threat of takedowns here. Yep. We're just going to see two guys. Technical warfare will be on display. And how do you see that one going?
How do I see it going? I think Israel's got the edge. He's younger. He's in his prime. And even if you take Anderson Silva in his prime, I still feel like Israel Adesanya is the better striker. Anderson's more well-rounded. He's more complete. He is a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and he can submit you, but he rarely takes you down. You either got to take him down, like we saw with Chael Sonnen, took him down, and then he can throw up a triangle, no worries. He can throw up all that, but I feel like this fight's going to stay on the feet, where it's going to be a great fight. We're going to see some real technical striking, and this is very smart of Israel to take this fight against Anderson, because if he wins this fight, he's getting a title shot.
Yeah, I would say absolutely. So, definitely.
He's sort of left the other guys in the division. He's thrown them out and gone straight for the big money fights, the big championship fight. So if he wins here and he wins in a good fashion, he's going to get that title shot, absolutely, 100%.
I definitely believe that's the next thing. I don't think he needs to beat Jacare Souza. I don't think he needs to beat. If he wins this, mark my words, he will get a title shot. It's such a good fight, and it's for the hardcore fans. They will love this fight, and we don't see, not every day you will see some really technical striking of both fighters go at each other. So we'll just have to wait and see. Melbourne can't come any sooner. That's where we're from, and we'll definitely be covering that one. But we've also been following Asian MMA, and none other than the best place to watch Asian MMA is One Championship. Absolutely. And we saw that in a double header. There was the heavyweight title and the lightweight title on the line. Brandon Vera defended his title against Maris Sorelli. We know Brandon Vera is a legit fighter. He was in the UFC, fought high caliber competition.
Yep.
And how'd you see that one?
Oh, that was a great fight. Brandon Vera coming off a 2-year layoff because he just couldn't get a fight, and that's partly due to the fact that the one championship, their heavyweight division, I don't know how many fights they've only got.
Yeah, they've only got a few fighters signed.
Maybe 3 or 4 fighters signed in that heavyweight division, and on top of the fact that no one wanted to fight him, did get the fight against Moro, and knocked him out in the first round. He was Moro came in sort of leaping with his chin out there, and all it took was Brandon to just throw his left hook. It just touched him on the chin. It didn't look like it was a hard shot, but it was the placement of the shot, and also the fact that Moro was coming in, and that just gave him enough power to be able to finish the fight. And it's a great fight. He's added to. He's solidifying the Filipino dominance in the one championship. So it's good. It's great.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's next for Brandon because there's not many heavyweights, but I know he's a great fighter, and he will continue to do great performance. But another Filipino won the vacant lightweight title in that on that card, Edward Foylang.
Yep.
He basically put on a great performance. It was a 5-round unanimous decision, and won the vacant title. Who Martin Ewan, the Aussie, vacated.
Yep.
He had 2 titles and vacated.
So he won the title against Amir Khan, and really put on a great performance. What I love about these smaller guys in one championship is they really like to go for the finish. They really push for the finish, and more often than not, when you watch the whole card, you'll see that there's a high finish percentage. This fight wasn't finished, but he really was creative with his striking. He was really mixing it up with wrestling, grappling, striking. He was throwing a lot of spinning stuff, spinning back fists, spinning elbows. It was a really great performance. He won a unanimous decision. He's a champ, and then became the 5th Filipino champ on the roster, which is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, they're doing great work there. But when Eddie Alvarez comes into the mix, there's going to be all sorts of different types of things happening, because Eddie Alvarez is a legit guy. He was a UFC champion, so Bellator champion. It's going to really mix up one championship having these fighters in there.
Well, that's the thing. We want to see that. Obviously, they're throwing in spanners in the works now. Demetrius Johnson, Eddie Alvarez. That's really going to upset the dynamic of these divisions. We're going to see Eddie Alvarez come in. Will he fight for a title straight away? Obviously, nothing's been announced yet, but I would assume since you're a champion in 2 different organizations, you're going to maybe get a title shot straight away against maybe Edward, of course. We're going to see the real level of these athletes. What will Eddie Alvarez be able to do? Will it be a similar caliber of what we're seeing in the UFC and Bellator, or will Eddie just run through all of them? Same thing with Demetrius. We don't know.
Well, we would expect them to. If not, then we're really we've got to give credit to one championship's caliber of fighting. But only time will tell. There's a lot of great fights coming up, and one hosts a lot of fights, and their production value is very good, and it's really popular over there. So we're looking forward to showcasing more of one championship as soon as some of these UFC guys get in there. But also UFC 231 is coming up. That's the next UFC card. It's going to be Max Holloway and Brian Ortega.
Let's talk. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Yeah. So Holloway Ortega, what's your pick? I know we have sort of dividing opinions on this, me and you.
Yeah.
What do you think about? I know you favour Brian Ortega highly. What do you think?
Yeah, in my opinion, I think Brian Ortega is not just a jiu-jitsu fighter anymore. He's got a very well-rounded game. He showed against Frankie Edgar that he can finish with his striking. Didn't need to do any jiu-jitsu or grappling. He just finished him brilliantly, and a guy who's never been finished.
Yeah.
So I favour Brian Ortega in this matchup. I think also because of the fact that Max Holloway is a purple belt in jiu-jitsu, and Brian Ortega is a high-level black belt, and I think Brian would slice through him.
I think that is possible. I do favour Max Holloway in this fight. I feel like he's more experienced. It's going to be hard to. I don't think you're going to win a decision against Max Holloway. I think you have to finish him, and Max Holloway doesn't go away. He doesn't get finished too easy. He doesn't give up too easy. Now, Brian Ortega has those submission threats, but he doesn't take the fight to the ground too often. He's more of like a Nick or Nate Diaz, where he has those submission skills, and he lights you up on the feet, and then the opponent shoots in, and then that's when he can work off his back, or that's when he can throw up some submissions and finish the fight. But I feel like when you look at just the striking, it's going to be a stand-up fight most likely for most of it. I feel like Max Holloway has the edge there. I think his boxing's just a bit sharper. I think he's a bit quicker. His movement's just a bit better. Brian Ortega's right there with him. but I think Max Holloway has the edge there. It's a slight edge. I think it's an edge enough to win the fight, and I think I'm predicting a Max Holloway win by knockout.
Yeah, well, I'm predicting Brian Ortega, and I don't know. I think he can win everywhere. I feel like Brian Ortega's striking ability is underrated, and I think it's going to be too much for Max Holloway, and Brian Ortega's going to raise the belt for his Mexican American family and friends everywhere.
Yeah.
As well, like Henry Cejudo did.
Yeah.
And he's going to bring honor to his name.
It's gonna be a great fight. I can't wait for it.
Yeah, I can't wait. There's plenty of fights to come, and we'll be covering it on Combat Society. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook. It's at Combat Society Oz, AUS, and we'll be posted on there. So make sure to check those out, and we'll see you guys next time.